You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday, 7th of November 2014. Following allegations of sex attacks in Cambridgeshire, Libyan cadet in Bassingbourn claims poor treatment. Police announce new appeal for information following 11th anniversary protests of Charlene Downs' disappearance. Addicts paid €1 an hour and a bottle of beer to pick liquor. Oh Jesus, pick liquor, oh dear, sorry. Addicts paid €1 an hour and a bottle of beer to pick litter. Try saying that. Germany's silencing of Islam critics. Canadian Muslim whiners upset by Prime Minister Stephen Harper's silence about anti-Muslim backlash following Islamic terrorist attacks. Chak, Pakistan, Christian blasphemy couple detained by boss before being murdered. Thought for the day, anti-this, bloody anti-everything, or are we? And finally, the Irish math test. UK news. Following allegations of sex attacks in Cambridgeshire, Libyan cadet in Bassingbourn claims poor treatment. A Libyan soldier has spoken to BBC News from the Cambridgeshire barracks at the centre of Britain's controversial training mission for the Libyan army. About 300 cadets are being sent home early from Bassingbourn barracks after allegations of sex attacks. The Ministry of Defence confirmed some recruits left the UK earlier and others will go in the coming days. Omar al-Mukhtar, not one of the accused, said the Libyan soldiers think the men concerned were badly treated. The MOD declined to comment on Mr al-Mukhtar's criticism. 2 of the cadets have admitted sexual assaults against women in Cambridge, with another charged but yet to enter a plea, and a further 2 have appeared in court charged with rape. Asked why the cadets were being flown home 2 weeks before the end of their course, he said, "I feel, like all the rest of us, there is no problem. It was the British from the beginning. They should have sought a solution and finished the training well. They didn't tell us about British law and what's the difference between right and wrong here." World at 8. We are supposed to love these people, or rather all followers of Islam, and ignore the ghastly women and animal rights, but we cannot ignore it. They follow these retards around like a cloak and we have to put up or shut up. This attitude must end and a message be sent out. Standards are standards throughout the world and not one religion should not only ignore them but promote their nasty alternatives. Police announced new appeal for information following 11th anniversary protests of Charlene Downs' disappearance. Police investigating the suspected murder of Blackpool teenager Charlene Downs on November the 5th confirmed they plan to launch a new appeal to find out what happened to her. Almost 11 years to the day since the 14-year-old disappeared, officers have revealed they are in talks about launching a fresh TV appeal as well as possibly offering a reward for new information. A spokesman for Lancashire Police said the force was in discussions with BBC's Crime Watch programme about launching an appeal in December and were negotiating putting up a new reward for information. The spokesman added, "This is one of the biggest inquiries in the history of Lancashire Police and we remain committed to it. We have a large team of detectives led by a senior investigating officer who are currently in the process of both revisiting old lines of inquiry and following new ones in a bid to find Charlene's killer or killers. We remain hopeful that this process will take us forward and clearly we will act on any new information which comes to light." Charlene of Buchanan Street, Blackpool was last seen on November the 1st, 2003 when she went to see friends on Blackpool Promenade. World at 8. Spare me please. They will probably delve deep enough to find it was Savile and not the 2 kebab owners who were heard describing her nasty death and to whom we have paid a small fortune for their trauma. European news. Addicts paid €1 an hour and a bottle of beer to pick litter. A German city has found a novel way to get unemployed alcoholics back into work by employing them as street cleaners and paying them in beer. The Pick-up programme, being trialled in Essen, Germany, insists the main focus isn't about getting the streets clean, although that is an obvious side effect, but rather it is about building confidence and self-esteem in certain members of society. Speaking to Deutsche Welle, alcoholic Jürgen says of his newfound employment, "I'm not doing this just for the beer. I can find beer on my own. I can get drunk any time I want. This is something that allows me to help the people around me, and it gives me a chance to give back to my city." In addition to the beer, the litter pickers are paid €1 an hour. A press release by the Addiction Centre running the programme said the beer is distributed based on the individual needs of the participant. Not everyone gets beer. Only the participants who aren't able to do their work without it. Despite the low wage, the programme isn't about exploiting alcoholics to do menial work. Rather, the idea is to allow participants who are not forced to take part to contribute to society in a way they otherwise wouldn't. The programme is based on a similar initiative in East Amsterdam in the Netherlands. The organisers, who work to get alcoholics and homeless off the streets, are part funded by the Dutch government, but insist that paying people who would otherwise be in trouble with beer is very cost effective. "If people are being arrested, it also costs society a lot of money," said the spokesman. "We have tried everything else. Now this is the only thing that works. We might not make them better, but we are giving them a better quality of life, and it's better for the neighbourhood that they're giving back something to society." After the first 12 months of the Amsterdam project, local police recorded a drop in stabbings and muggings at a formerly troubled park. One Dutch alcoholic said of his newfound self-respect, "They used to treat us like garbage, and now we are picking up their garbage, so we're not garbage anymore." World at 8. Should try it over here with the Romas and pay them in one-way tickets back home. Germany's silencing of Islam critics. Critics have said that the $51 million mega mosque's former name was quite telling. Originally called the Centre for Islam in Europe, Munich, and rumoured to be oriented towards the radical Wahhabi Muslim sect, its opponents have alleged that it is designed to be a key strategic platform for spreading Islam throughout Europe, as the Gatestone Institute's Sohan Kern put it in 2013. And the matter has inspired government surveillance of the mosque's critics. And now a court in Bavaria has reaffirmed that such spying is lawful. Moreover, a referendum that would have allowed local citizens to decide if the mosque should be constructed has been blocked by Munich city officials, even though twice the necessary number of signatures for the referendum to proceed were gathered. That German agents would be monitoring critics of the Munich mega mosque was announced in April of last year. The move to silence critics of the mosque for being unconstitutional was announced by Bavarian Interior Minister Joachim Herrmann in a press conference on April 12th and represents an unprecedented threat to the exercise of free speech in post-reunification Germany. The targets of this government's ire are a citizens' movement called Die Freiheit Bayern, Freedom Bavaria, as well as the Munich branch of a highly popular free speech blog called Politically Incorrect, PI, which focuses on topics related to immigration, multiculturalism and Islam in Germany, reported Kern in 2013. World at 8. They wouldn't have done this for the Jewish synagogues, would they? Why do the Muslims hold sway in Germany? Is it because of the Turkish alliances? If so, it's an archaic and unrealistic to house these number of Muslims in a European country. The hint is in the title: European, not Arabian country. World News. Canadian Muslim whiners upset by Prime Minister Stephen Harper's silence about anti-Muslim backlash following Islamic terrorist attacks. Once again playing the victim card, Muslim groups are bitching that Stephen Harper hasn't spoken out against a spike in alleged anti-Muslim hate crimes since separate attacks by Muslim terrorists left 2 Canadian soldiers dead on Canadian soil. Canadian PM Stephen Harper: "I have more important things to worry about than Muslim feelings." Love him. CTV News. The Prime Minister has not publicly uttered one word of support for Canadian Muslims following the incidents which Harper and the RCMP have labelled acts of terrorism. He's remained silent despite an apparent backlash against Muslims, including the defacing of a mosque in Cold Lake, Alta, racist slurs against Muslim candidates in Toronto's municipal election and threats against the BC Muslim Association. In the latest incident, windows were smashed early Friday morning at the Asuna Muslims Association Mosque in Ottawa. Mosque President Mohammed Mustafa believes that vandalism was probably in response to last week's incidents, the hit-and-run murder of a soldier in Quebec and the killing of an honour guard in the National War Memorial by a gunman who then stormed the Parliament buildings. In both cases, the killers were Canadian Muslims with an admiration for extremist Islamic terrorists who have been on a brutal rampage in Iraq and Syria. World at 8. Should have destroyed the mosque like they destroy Christian churches when offended. You can make a government bleat on about anti-Muslim feeling, but you can't stop a people having different feelings as they have to live with them, not the rich guys. Chak, Pakistan. Christian blasphemy couple detained by boss before murder. A Pakistan Christian bonded labourer and his pregnant wife, killed for alleged blasphemy, were locked inside a brickmaking factory before their murder to prevent them from fleeing their debts, relatives said Wednesday. Shehzad Masih and Shami Bibi, who was 4 months pregnant and a mother to 3 children, were later beaten, surrounded by a crowd of up to 1,500 villagers, then thrown on top of a lit furnace, multiple witnesses said. By the time the Muslim mob was done, only charred bones and their discarded shoes remained. The gruesome incident took place Tuesday in the tiny hamlet of Chak, 59, village 59, near Kotrada Kishan town, some 60 kilometres 40 miles southwest of Lahore. It has sparked protests by Christians and outrage amongst rights activists when police arrested 44 suspects Wednesday. Jawad Kamar, a local police official, said according to initial reports events began to unfold more than a week earlier with the death of Shehzad's father, a local religious healer. When he died, Shehzad's wife went to his room and cleaned up the mess. There was a trunk in his room. Shehzad's wife took the things that could be useful and threw the trash in front of her house, said Kamar. The garbage collector collected the trash the next day and told the local cleric that he collected pages of the Koran thrown in front of Shehzad's house from the trash. Iqbal Massa, Shehzad's older brother, told AFP that he and his whole family were bonded workers paying off their debts to the brick kiln owner, a man named Mohammed Yusuf, an illegal practice branded by rights group as akin to modern day slavery. We take advance money from the owner and work for him. It has been going on for years. On November the 3rd, the owner had called Iqbal and detained him, sensing that he might run away to save his life, he said tearfully. World at 8. These people may put on airs and graces and speak English, but in truth they are primitives and no better than many Africans in their attitudes. Why we are encouraging immigration from this country in India I really cannot think. When we Brits were over there they couldn't wait to get us out, but seem to have followed us unfortunately. This is a terrible incident which will not hit the main media news. It might just offend us. Thought for the day. Anti this, bloody anti that, or are we? I know that the above title will banjax many people, especially since we in the West are now so used to the rewriting of history and events, but even this has to be taken to a new high now with the advent of the past few years of misinformation. Now, misinformation gives the effect to the general public of being very informative, but is in fact the exact opposite. Not in the fact that it gives no information or facts to the public, but in the fact that it gives half the story or promotes the lesser lie. And it is this which now educates our younger children and forms their opinion of what their world and the immediate portion of the UK should be or is like. A small example is an article in the Daily Mail on helping one's child onto the property ladder. All the helpees were mothers and the recipients were male. My husband piped up, "Did you notice that blah 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 blah?" My retort was that this was biased reporting and rarely did fathers help their sons, but would always help their daughters. I know of one such fellow who paid his grown daughter's mortgage on her sole occupancy house, and when they moved away he took out another one on a house in their area. It is the old sex thing, daughters and fathers and mothers and sons, but it needs to be both pictures, not just half. Take the rewriting of history in World War II, as Churchill said, "History will be kind to me because I will write it," and he did, and it has. Now we're talking half-truths here, and to be honest, I was not there at the time, or not in my present form as I was a baby. Now, if we are to believe the current form of thinking in the West, Hitler and the Third Reich was doomed from the start, and the Jews were a wonderful race of people who helped the Germans in their time of need. And let us be clear on this, in no way does any race or religion deserve to be butchered for just being what they are, although in my personal book they do deserve more than a slap on the wrist for what I call purposely overbreeding, but that is another story. The Jews in Germany did not outbreed or convert millions of Jews pre-war too, as indeed they may well be now by the Muslims. So between the anti-Jews and the anti-Reich there is a huge space of time and stories which simply do not match up, and those that do have been altered for the public. Now maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. Maybe Hitler had the news to cash in on the large German opinion that the Jews were for the main communists who stirred up trouble in the ghastly economy thanks to the Treaty of Versailles, and perhaps their alter egos were the rich Jewish bankers who took control of practically everything pre-Third Reich. Now to fight one evil it usually takes another, and it did. Hitler had the backing of the people in a big way, one can't deny it. If not in the beginning, he certainly did in the middle. Now maybe the Jewish problem was to send them away to rehab or work camps or to ghettoise them. Not good. But what do you think we would do with the millions of Muslims in Europe should they not take the first step towards disposing of us? Think carefully on that one. The Germans had a homegrown problem, not a problem which reared its head over a 50-year time period. The Jews had been in Germany for 800 years and many regarded themselves as Germans in all but religion, which they kept to themselves. So we have a country being well organised for its own people. It doesn't make one anti-Jewish, and I certainly am not that. Now we have the UK and the US all with their own little causes and needing another war to make money and at the same time obliterate patriotism. You must know that the Coudenhove-Kalergi plan was well underway by then. Well, without going into pages of this, the so-called Allies succeeded, and I think we can safely say that a vast majority of what is pictured and told is taken and redone magnificently. But to say so is immediately being anti-Jewish, which I ain't. Everyone starved at the end of that war, especially Germany, and then they had to put up with the Russians, who hated the Germans as much as the Jews. Divisions of that country was along the lines of the subsequent Indian balls up, with communism rising to the top like a turd. Yup, I am anti-communist. So therein we have entire books, films, plays, etc. built on what could be a partial lie or a complete blowing up of the lesser lie. How do we know, as we rely on history, to give us the facts? Another lesser lie, Richard III was a vile hunchback who murdered children and worse. Now facts reveal he was no such thing, but the poor bugger's been reviled for hundreds of years. So the fact is that nasty facts last longer than good facts. Now anti-Islam. Well, we in Europe have a good reason to be just that, but you would be surprised just how many people are pro-Islam in a thoroughly dim way. Now I'm not anti-Islam in Islamic countries, but I am anti-Islam in Europe. I do not believe that minor wars in Iraq and Afghanistan allow them to pour into my country by the bucketful and start breeding. Call me odd. We have left Afghanistan now, and within 2 years it will revert back to an Islamic state, and do I care whether women are educated and have the vote over there? No, I do not. I am however wondering how we in our country will get rid of, when the time comes, as it will undoubtedly do. When our patience or idiocy has run out, when the NHS has completely failed due to huge influxes in most areas, when our schools are no longer fit for Christians, when our way of life has generally reached a slightly better decorated look of the third world, when our media has finally done its worst and we realise en masse that Islam is not a good look for Europe, will we be the Third Reich of the history books? Will our need to reassert ourselves result in the do-gooders of the future panning us and our hopes? I hope not. If you're anti-Muslim you have to be pro-Jewish, don't you? No you don't. You can be whatever you like, my friends. I don't mind the Jews. They do not outbreed and they don't usually spread like a virus, but in the US they are a different kettle of fish entirely. Over there we have the non-Orthodox Jews who don't go to shul and only observe the basics of the Judaic law. But they do have the capacity to cash in on a culture which admires them and also sympathises with the Holocaust or lack of it, especially the media and film cultures. It is this classroom that has bred another type of Jew, not a communist but very near it, a leftish Democrat. It is these people that form the neocon adversaries of true patriotism, and I do not mean the white-sheeted ones, who are entitled to their views like anyone else on the planet. There is very little difference between the mindset of the UK UAF and the KKK, like it or lump it. Their mantra is the same: they are right and no one else is allowed to have an opinion. Bless. So we have big media and big corporations in the US being run by this fraternity of Jews who hate the Arabs as much as the Arabs hate them, and now they hate the Russians as well. The Russians, and I am an admirer of Putin, a true nationalist, have some of the worst pogroms against the Jews in the years leading up to both World War I and World War II, which led to a great portion of Russia and Eastern European Jews fleeing to the Americas. So we in Europe seem faced with a choice which is unpleasant and unfair in the extreme. If we are to pander to popular media misinformation, we should be all pro-Muslim, anti-Jewish, pro-US media, anti-British white patriotism, pro-ethnic diversity on a never-ending scale, anti-British, pro-black, pro-communist, anti-German or Austrian and pro-Ebola. I say pro-Ebola because we seem to be ignoring the fact that hordes of the buggers from West Africa are still pouring into this country and Europe, and yet the media is very quiet about it and centres on the Sierra Leone effort with our Royal Navy helping out. Let's hope they teach them to burn the bodies at last, or one aid worker will be the least of our problems. We also have to get one thing clear for various reasons, good or bad. Muslims hate the Jews more than we or the Third Reich could ever do. There is real hatred there, fanned by misinformation and the exploitation of the lesser lie. Fact: Muslims do not need the holy city. The indigenous Semites who lived there in biblical times were pagan, then Jewish, and some converted to Christianity under Jesus, son of the house of David, a Jew. Some converted to Islam, but their so-called prophet Muhammad never went to the Holy Land. He was not born there or lived there. Followers of that prophet do not have the right to be there at all. We, in the current lovey-dovey idealism of the Middle East, do not realise that the entire area was and is steeped in the blood of ancient civilisations, and the least of these is Islam, which reached a height during the Crusades, in which the Jews suffered as much as the Christians and the Ottomans. The Temple of the Holy Mount is for Christians primarily and then Jews, sod the Muslims, just because they live there and have louder voices. We seem to be more anti-Jewish than anti-Muslim. I can't understand it. I am neither, except in my own country, and then I can be very belligerent about it. There are now more mosques than churches or synagogues. Get real, this problem with Islam is not going away, especially with Cameron, who wants to see an Islamic Prime Minister. Get over it, Cammy. It might get more votes, but won't last even with the easygoing Brits. There has to be a cut-off, when even they don't believe what's going on and might start writing letters. There are many media misinformative lies or altering of the truth, or indeed a total ignorance of the truth which might well be hushed up from on high to avoid the public panic which being British shouldn't happen. Well, it did during the summer riots of course a few years ago, but then they were mainly black and ethnic looters, which says it all. We Brits do not riot, we do not protest, and we just sit there, taking it all on the chin, for now. How long will we put up with these lies, which do nothing but fan the flames of diversity and dampen the ones of patriotism? How long can we simply not ask the right questions? How long can we ignore the enemy in our midst? How long is a piece of string? And finally, the Irish maths test, which I'm not doing in the Irish vernacular because I can't do it very well. An Irishman wants a job, but the foreman won't hire him until he passes a little maths test. Here's your first question, the foreman said. Without using numbers, represent the number 9. Without numbers, the Irishman says. That's easy, and proceeds to draw 3 trees. What's this, the boss asks. Have you ain't got no brain? Tree and tree plus tree makes 9, said the Irishman. Fair enough, said the boss. Here's your second question. Use the same rules, but this time the number is 99. The Irishman stares into space for a while, then picks up the picture that he's just drawn and makes a smudge on each tree. Here you go. The boss scratches his head and says, how on earth do you get that to represent 99? Each of the trees is dirty now, so it's dirty tree plus dirty tree, that makes 99. The boss is getting worried that he's actually going to have to hire this Irishman, so he says, all right, last question. Same rules again, but represent the number 100. The Irishman stares into space some more, then he picks up the picture again and makes a little mark at the base of each tree and says, here you go, 100. The boss looks at the attempt. You must be nuts if you think that represents 100. The Irishman leads forward and points to the marks at the base of each tree and whispers, "A little dog came along and pooped by each tree. So now you've got dirty tree and a turd, dirty tree and a turd, a dirty tree and a turd, which makes 100. The Irishman is now the head of Ryanair. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend. Muslim backlash following Islamic terrorist attacks. Chak, Pakistan, Christian blasphemy couple detained by boss before being murdered. Thought for the day, anti this, bloody anti everything, or are we? And finally, the Irish math test. UK news. Following allegations of sex attacks in Cambridgeshire, Libyan cadet in Bassingbourn claims poor treatment. A Libyan soldier has spoken to BBC News from the Cambridgeshire barracks at the charged but yet to enter a plea, and a further 2 have appeared in court charged with rape. Asked why the cadets were being flown home 2 weeks before the end of their course, he said, "I feel, like all the rest of us, there is no problem. It was the British from the beginning. They should have sought a solution and finished the training well. They didn't tell us about British law and what's the difference between right and wrong here." World at 8. We are supposed to love these people, or rather all followers of Islam, and ignore the ghastly women and animal rights, but we cannot ignore the centre of Britain's controversial training mission for the Libyan army. About 300 cadets are being sent home early from Bassingbourn barracks after allegations of sex attacks. The Ministry of Defence confirmed some recruits left the UK earlier and others will go in the coming days. Omar al-Mukhtar, not one of the accused, said the Libyan soldiers think the men concerned were badly treated. The MOD declined to comment on Mr al-Mukhtar's criticism. 2 of the cadets have admitted sexual assaults against women in Cambridge, with another claims poor treatment. Police announced new appeal for information following 11th anniversary protests of Charlene Downs' disappearance. Addicts paid €1 an hour and a bottle of beer to pick liquor. Oh Jesus, pick liquor, oh dear, sorry. Addicts paid €1 an hour and a bottle of beer to pick litter. Try saying that. Germany's silencing of Islam critics. Canadian Muslim whiners upset by Prime Minister Stephen Harper's silence about
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number 1 in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday, 7th of November 2014. Following allegations of sex attacks in Cambridgeshire, Libyan cadet in Bassingbourn